There we go. Welcome to the January 20th, 2022 Java Operators Community Meeting. This meeting is being recorded. Please don't say anything you don't want to be on the internet forever at some point. All right, sorry, let me get rid of the old agenda items from last week. Okay. Do we have any new faces that would like to introduce themselves?
Oh, maybe me, but I'm here with Andrea actually. I'm from Red Hat. I'm from the Keycloak team, and I'm the tech lead for the Keycloak operator, for the new Keycloak operator that will be based on Java.
Awesome, welcome. We'll be glad to help with whatever you guys need, and if there's things that are, if there's features you would like, let us know. And if there's questions you have about the library and tooling, let us know about that too. So great to have you. Welcome.
Thank you. No, we are actually in touch with the whole SDK team already.
Yeah, I figured, but it's good to remind anyone else who was listening.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Anyone have anything they wanted to bring up community-wise? Any announcements? Any particular topic they wanted to talk about this morning?
No, just maybe some details. I added this meeting to the README. Not sure if you saw it, Jesus.
I did not.
On the page, so I hope it's not an issue or something. It's for now it was just propagated on Discord, but I thought it would be good to have it also there, so it's more visible. Actually, no, sometimes people didn't even heard about it that there is a community meeting. So if you and I truncated this page.
Okay. No, that's perfect.
Yeah, not sure the password policy, but yeah. So it's.
Gosh. Get you a link to that in here too. No, that was a good idea. I mean, it's worth putting wherever we think people will find it. So I'm not opposed to having it spread out far and wide.
Yeah. Other than that, I would like to just maybe go through some issues later to discuss here with the wider community, but that can wait if there are some more important stuff.
Anyone else? I think that's what this pull request was for.
Oh yeah, my fault. I put this on the wrong agenda part.
No, okay, that's good. So this is kind of related to what Attila did to their README, so I'll go ahead and take care of this right now while we're here. Like I said, far and wide, the more it gets out, the more people will join and see it.
Hey, one quick thing just be aware of. When I made this link, I set it not to expire and have like unlimited joins. But I know sometimes I've seen like other communities where the Discord link will just like decide not to work after like a few weeks or a month. So that's just something we have to keep an eye on. Like by all means, we should have the link there. It's just something I thought I'll mention. I've seen Discord invite links just like expire themselves for no good reason.
Okay.
Yes, that's surprisingly not happening in Java Operator SDK. It happens all other Discord channels, I mean. So
Cool. Anything else? And we can
I
talk
don't know
about.
if that.
Go ahead,
Yeah.
Christoph.
Yeah, I don't know if that falls under our community interest, but I was wondering what the schedule was for the Operator SDK plugins release, or rather the Operator SDK CLI with the update that we did recently. And actually, we should probably update it again. That's also why I'm asking about when the next version will be released, so that we can
Yes,
do
yes,
the
yes.
update before that.
So the SDK itself, they released 116, I believe it was last week, and 117 is on the schedule. And that, let me find it, because we can work backwards from there. Issues, and remove my little box here. So yes, 117 is tentatively scheduled February 2nd. And then, so as long as we get a release of the Java operators plugin before then, it will make that release. And currently there was one update that went in recently that I think you had, Christoph. I merged that one.
Yeah.
Yes. And then I've got a bump to go 117 and stuff for the plugins in flight. And
Yeah,
I think we wanted to do 2.0, right?
What do you mean for the SDK?
Yeah, bringing the 2.0 SDK in
that was the PR we merged, actually.
Yes, I saw that, of course.
But we actually it was actually 201, and we released 202 today, and we'll release the extension 302 to get the SDK 2.2 in there, probably either later today, and I will create a new PR for the plugins.
Okay. So I can probably, once all these PRs and updates come in, I can run through the tutorial, make sure everything is still okay, and then we can plan a release maybe next week.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Where's the tutorial again? Because yeah, maybe
it's in the docs.
Go through it.
It's in, if you go to docs tutorial.
Okay.
I'll add it to.
It's probably updated because there's been some API changes, so I'll go through it and do the changes as required.
Okay. Awesome. Oh, yeah, that's a cool. Okay. Awesome. I like that. Yes, Google. I know there was a typo. All right, let's go ahead and get into some of these issues. I think the only new one that came in was to bump the Go and KubeBuilder and stuff up to 117. So that's what my PR was for. This guy. All right. Is there anything that has not been triaged, or Attila? Is there any specific one we wanted to start with?
I don't know. I have these 3-4 issues just to go through. Maybe introduce you and.
Okay.
Should I share my screen or?
Sure, if that's easier. Let me stop
Okay.
sharing.
Okay, let's do it.
There you go.
Thank you.
The floor is yours.
Thanks. So that I have just a few topics. Not sure if anything older. So about the ability of that we briefly discussed on watching multiple namespaces, this should be removed. Actually, I checked it, and the contour runtime QBuilder doesn't support it. Neither the Kopf, the Python framework. But currently, with the new dependent resources, it's also there for the informers. So we kind of leaning towards to support it because, but actually a use case for some of the workflows on OpenShift, as we discussed on the Kubernetes Slack of the official CNCF Kubernetes Slack. So it's not super important, but it's actually useful. So until it doesn't provide or bring too much complexity, I'm completely fine with that. So that's on this regard, unless somebody disagrees.
So hold on, you said QBuilder doesn't support this?
Not me, but
Or if someone said that it didn't, because I mean, the reason I ask is because I verified this with Varsha, and there is a multi-namespace cache builder in controller runtime, and when we even have a doc on how to set that up for the operator
okay.
SDK.
This Code Ranger guy said it.
Okay, then
either all or single namespace. I didn't verify it explicitly.
okay, no, I can circle back with Code Ranger or Noah. I think it's his real name.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean the operator framework SDK does support the multi namespace where you can select which ones you want.
So that's even better for us. So then other argument to support also on our sites. If it's a common case.
Yeah,
and here's that.
And to back that up, we even had folks. Joe Lanford was saying that he recently had someone asking for that functionality as recent as last week. So, yeah.
Okay, so basically we already have it. Just it wasn't that simple to set up with informers. Actually, you had to do a kind of for loop or something, or even currently you had to do a full for loop to create all those informers. So it's not that big hassle. It just could be nice API from our side within the framework. That, but okay, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it's a very wide use case, but for people who don't want to or cannot deploy the operator cluster-wise, it's often useful to be able to watch multiple namespaces. Because obviously the alternative would be to deploy cluster-wise and just filter on labels or whatever, so that you only get the namespaces events from namespaces you're interested in. But yeah, for people, I think it's mostly useful for people who want to restrict the security, the permissions that are given to the operator as much as possible. And just give the minimal set of permissions that would still make the operator work, but tighten everything up.
Yeah. Okay. We might found a new maintainer for the Spring Boot starter. That's a very good news. We had a implementation from this guy from Netflix. So that's very good news. So we have now our up-to-date Spring Boot support with the starter. I will create a CI/CD pipeline to release it to Maven Central and test it. So there was an issue, this popping up time to time, that even, let's say we have a operator, we manage some resources, either Kubernetes or not, and we have informers for those resources. And theoretically, if you have everything in place, you don't have to do anything else. You don't have to set up a periodic reconciliation or something like that. Maybe just for a failsafe. And I also discussed this on the Slack. Basically, that yes, it's a kind of a good practice on sometimes, especially if you're writing your first operator or you want to have a failsafe there, still have a kind of a standard long-term reconciliation loop that or trigger that reconciliation anyways after some time. So, and that could be very nicely and simply in a simple way implemented. So I created an issue, and basically it's about that probably in the controller configuration that we already have, you would be able to set that the maximum delay between the reconciliations is about, I don't know. I think in controller runtime, this is 10 hours. By default, it's there. And yeah, so the trick with the wording is it's not a fixed rate, because in fixed rate, that would be not that nice. You can have a trigger, and after the trigger, you could have just this fixed rate executed again. So after the last reconciliation, there will be 8-hour delay at most. Then it will be reconciled again in this case. It's of course customizable. I'm not sure if this should be kind of a string encoding the time or 2 fields, but we can discuss that later. It's a detail. So it's again about the failsafe for have they reconcile.
And the purpose for that is if there are no events coming in, this forces a reconciliation to happen every
Yes.
10 hours or whatever the thing is set at. Yeah. Okay, that makes sense.
Yes, exactly. So if you have any comments or how to make this nicer or something, please do. That's would be useful. I think it's other than that.
On the Go side, the Go has a duration type, and that's usually what people will pass in. I don't know if does Java have something like that, like a time?
Yes, this is time unit. There is some like time unit .hours.
Okay, unit and then a value. I see.
It's nicer in Go because it's just a multiplication that you have.
Yeah,
to
it's the same kind, same type. It has both. Okay.
Yeah, I really like that one in Go. That's very nice. And yeah, that's it for this issue. If you have any no remarks. And then I created these 2 issues on this new feature. I don't know, Chris, you already talked about that dependent resources and how is the current looks like. I started to review it today. I think it looks really, really good. It's not merged yet, but yeah, if you want, you can introduce it and then I can talk about these designs for further and we can discuss if it makes sense for those.
Well, do I really need to introduce it again? I mean, we've talked about it several times. I don't know if people
okay.
I mean, I can do it again, but I think pretty much people on the call, I mean, unless there's someone who wasn't and who wants to hear about that feature specifically, I can go through it again, but otherwise I think we can go ahead with your issues.
Okay, sorry, I have this leaky memory that I usually forget what was happening on the previous meeting. So, sorry, maybe we already talked about this.
Can I ask one question?
Yes.
It's regarding the dependent resources. So when are we going to have a snapshot release with dependent resources we can experiment with? I think that we have in-flight pull request and discussion since quite some time.
Well, yeah, I mean, well, I mean, we could definitely do it, but right now the snapshot versions, they only target main. So I guess to have a snapshot version with the current infrastructure, that would require merging the feature, the branch. Otherwise, we would need to set up snapshotting for that specific branch as well, which we could definitely do.
But
If
my
needed.
question is, we are planning or not to merge dependent resources to main?
We are planning for sure. I don't know. So I made a comment some on today, but I think Chris, we talked about that. We will branch 2.0 X.
Yeah.
And then 2.1 will be on the master, and there will be a snapshot releases of it for 2.1 soon.
Okay, sounds fair.
So
yeah, because I mean,
so many discussions. I would really love to try, and if I have a snapshot, it would be much easier.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of a chicken and egg issue, right? Because people, I mean, it's a complex PR, and people, obviously, like you said, are not really trying it because it's not in main, but we wanted to wait for comments before merging it. So yeah, it's kind of a catch-22 issue, but
I don't think you will have comments if you don't merge from users.
Mhm.
I mean, I will be happy to see the pull request merged, just start to try it out, find bugs and fix on top, and see fixes on top. I do not have nothing against going this direction, but with a PR in a branch,
yeah,
it's really hard to have comments from users.
Yeah,
I agree.
To be honest, it's maybe I was pushed it upfront because we don't want to release before V2. I had some other issues to do this week, so it's probably because of me waiting too much to review it. But yeah, I think it will be very soon there on the main.
Amazing, thanks.
Yeah, so it basically looks like now like this. You can define a list of resources, which called dependent. So there were discussion if, in my opinion, this we could live with annotations. If it be just an object model, that would be maybe a little bit more flexible, but again, less declarative. But so basically, currently, it's an annotation structure. So we define that we want a deployment class to be managed by this dependent resource, which has a further methods and things to implement, the updater, deleter, and all the logic around it. And this issue
just a quick interjection, because it's configured by annotations, but basically the annotations are just a shortcut to wire things automatically for you, but you can do the same things programmatically. And maybe I should show an example of doing that. But yeah, I mean, obviously it's easier with annotations.
So you can specify the objects tree basically with.
I mean, yeah, because that's what the annotations do, right? They construct the objects that are needed underneath.
Yeah, but just we don't have an API for that anywhere. If I would like to do that, I can do it now at that PR with just annotations.
Well, I mean, yeah, I think so, yeah. I mean, I haven't tried to do it, but I don't see why not. I mean, the annotations are using public. I mean, the annotation configuration is using public methods, so I assume that it should be possible to do the same.
That's what you mean. Okay, that's.
I mean, obviously, there's not a nice API like to do it, but the objects should be available, and you can wire everything manually if you know how to do it and what to do. But yeah,
yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so yeah, so basically for until now or the current PI, we have this list of without this this part that depends on, and this issue is about to kind of manage dependencies between the resources. Obviously, on Kubernetes, shouldn't be that much of a deal, because usually if you apply some resources in Kubernetes philosophy, these will try to reconcile, wait for each other, and until other which are depends on is ready, and then our becomes ready after we come. So it's basically a Helm chart or other solution, just really apply the resources all at once. But there are some cases. I think Andrea, for example, had a case in his operator when you want to have, for example, a deployment ready, and after the deployment, you maybe create a job that will execute something on the API which was just deployed. And obviously, we have to wait until that other resource becomes ready or gets into a certain state, to be more generic. So with basically these two notions, kind of having a depends on relation between the resources and the state condition when that happens, that we actually depending on other resource to be in a certain state happens. And typically when you deploy a database like Postgre, and you want to create a default schema with an API call, you wait for it, then you execute, maybe deploy a job or just execute an API call after you know the deployment was ready successfully and the service is up and running. So in this design, basically solving these two problems. One is this what I mentioned. The other is when we actually want to have an input for other resource from a resource, other resources output. Like I already deployed a service which has maybe a URL or an IP or a cluster or whatever, and that is in the status. And I want to use that output variable maybe for other custom resource, for example, but that output in the status I want to use in the other custom resource. So basically these cases could be nicely covered with this depends on, and I can say that I have this resource, but I want to just add or create it or manage it or start managing it when the other two are already in a certain state, usually ready. So, and basically that's it, with some other details that this waiting could be sync and async. Like we can say that we know the deployment will, until this Kafka, I don't know, cluster starts, it will take at least 10 minutes, so we can now quit and do the reconciliation again, I don't know, in 10 or 2 minutes. So that would be then kind of an async waiting for the conscious. Until that time, we don't really hold the thread. We can release that and use the thread for the other reconciliation. So that's another detail. And then there are some other stuff which are really just about the implementation. We can have a cycle detection, because this creates this directed acyclic graph of resources which depend on each other. Basically, this is very much an analogy what is done in Terraform or CloudFormation or you name it, the others, these cluster management tools and resource management tools. So basically, that's the issue. And yeah, would be happy to yeah, what do you think about it?
I think that covers some cases, but it might be a little too limiting, because for some, I mean, that covers the case where you know the topology before starting your operator, basically, and your topology is more or less settled before you start. But in some cases, I mean, I don't know, like if that will, well, maybe that would cover the case. Like, for example, if one of the dependent resources fails, will that trigger reconcile so that you check the condition again until, I mean, basically you just reconcile and check the condition again until you get to that state, or things like that.
Yes, that's basically in mind that if you reconcile everything, you reconcile the whole DAG again, all the resources, you know, each DAG as you would normally in any circumstances in an operator. So the whole workflow is executed again. So there is nothing like I continue from this point. When you execute a reconciliation, it starts over again from the first resource and dependent resources and all over again.
And my other point is that, I mean, yeah, we need to get the first the dependent resources merged so that people can play with it, and then we can figure out how to build on top of it.
Yes, of course. Yeah. I mean, this is just what was kind of bugging me to have if you have such a system like a higher abstraction, then we should cover these semantics, which are on the other resource management systems. And because it's not just about Kubernetes resources, it's about non-Kubernetes resources too. And yeah, the next issue is even. But basically, with this simple semantics, we can have everything. But for example, almost everything, maybe not nice, but with like Terraform has, or yeah. That was a too strong claim, but they don't have modules or something. But basically, this execution tree can be described very nicely. Or DEG.
Where would they where would a user write this, the dependence? Is this part of their main, or
sorry, I think it's already, there are samples on that what Chris prepared. It's
okay,
like
okay,
annotation.
Yep.
And you can still then execute some special code, but if there are some extreme cases, but as we will see, it's actually this method might be empty at the end. We didn't cover maybe we could create an issue how to manage the status, but it's no issue for that yet, but it will come. But basically you can declaratively define a set of resources, dependencies between them, and the whole logic of ordering and updating and comparing the specs will be handled for you. Maybe with your help, or maybe input needed, like in the deployment, you need to say how to create that resource from the input parameters, how to update that in case. But all this logic that normally would be there all the time, right? The spec comparison and things like that, that should be handled for you.
Okay.
And the idea also is that makes things a lot better for testing, because you can check, I mean, you can test those dependent resources logic, like the creation based on the primary resource state, or the update. You can test those logic separately from the main reconcile logic. So you can make sure that all your dependent resources, I mean, the dependent resources code behaves as expected, given, for example, a given primary resource. And that can be done without a cluster. So that you can basically unit test the hell out of it without having to run things on the cluster. So that I think it provides nice isolation for each of your dependent. I mean, obviously that doesn't cover all possible cases, because there will be operators that are more complex than that. But it should cover a lot of the typical cases that we see. So, and yeah, I should add that the dependent resources, they work they were initially developed for Kubernetes resources, but they've been extended to also support external resources. It's not as straightforward to implement external resources, because, well, they are external, so they vary a lot. So we can't make the same assumptions that we do for Kubernetes resources, but you still can implement them declaratively. And like I said, that work is still early. The scope is limited because we are thinking like Attila was saying, we should have automated status management as well, because when you know the dependent resources, you could define conditions like say, okay, that conditions means that the dependent is fair, that condition means that it's ready, and basically all those conditions could bubble up to the primary resource, and you can compute and aggregate status automatically based on the tree of dependents or graph of dependence. And that covers a lot of what operators do logically. So once we have that, like Attila was saying, basically the reconcile method for your reconciler kind of goes away for the common use cases. Most of it is covered, so you can really focus on really the salient part of your business logic, what makes your operator special, basically. And that's the goal. Yeah.
Just to mention that about the low-level API with the informers and everything as it is now, which is basically equivalent what is in controller runtime, it will stay. So this is on top of that. And it's actually, we had a discussion before if even this should be a different module or should go to the core. For now, it is in the core, and and probably will stay. We will see. But actually, could be just implemented as a extension of a reconciler. So without just a different layer, but we will make sure that all the methods and all the structures that we have now, which for the low level, just managing the informers, managing the low-level code with the client, Kubernetes client and stuff like that, is still there. It's accessible. It's basically just on top of that. And as Christoph said, it's maybe not everything could be covered, but there is the other issue to catch maybe most of them. If you had the pleasure and all the sweat and nightmare to work with Terraform, then there is a special thing there. It's called the new resource. And basically, I think what I created an issue, and this is really about those corner cases. When Terraform is really good. So it's when you sometimes cannot model something like a resource. And not every API is a resource-oriented API, or not every, just want to make a HTTP call or something. Then there is this, there still should be a possibility to just do an action. And this was introduced, for example, in Terraform with using this new resource. For example, you are able to execute a bash script with the new resource type. And this issue is the analogy to that in this system. Just if you want to have a special corner case, which is not really a resource, then should be an ability to make a step. And since we already have kind of this tree, this could be just in the middle of the execution. So it's kind of a hooking into this system with a custom action. And after I created this resource, let's say resource 1, I want to execute action before I create the resource 2. So just to make it very generic, and this is really for the sake of completeness of such system, we need to have a kind of analogy to the new resource, what is in Terraform.
I have one question. With this new model, I do see a lot of advantages for spinning up and trying to achieve a desired state with resources, independent resources, which is extremely nice. Maybe even integrating external resources on Kubernetes, etc. So this is really good. What I miss, or maybe I don't know enough, is if there is any kind of support for building workflows. Imagine that I want to, I don't know, create a secret, spin a job, when the job is finished, do a deployment, and reconcile from there on. Do we have any kind of support for those kind of use cases?
So that's the depends on. So if you want to, if you have, I don't know, what was the example again? So first you make a deployment.
No, the other way around. So deployment is the last thing that I want to do. But before creating a deployment, what I want to do is to create a secret, run a job, obtain something, delete the job, and then create the deployment. So
I mean,
it's a workflow.
It's
a workflow.
it's kind of implicitly done, right? I mean, theoretically speaking, obviously you could do it without a state, because I mean theoretically speaking, it should be stateless. Your operator should be stateless, so you don't really want to implement a workflow. It's just you just reconcile again and again until you get the state you want, right? So the first time around, you try to create a deployment, but you don't have the necessary information, so you create your secret, and then you reconcile again, and you have the secret, now you need the job, so you do the job, but you still can do the deployment, so you reconcile again, and basically over and over again. So yeah, workflow would be a nice optimization, but strictly speaking, it's not needed, right?
But so that's it. So
I understand that it's not strictly needed, and you can always build this on top by relying on the state or by watching the resources that are there, etc. But if the workflow is complex enough, it starts to become really hard to write it as a reconciled loop.
So basically, I think this is something that you can model here. So first, dependent resource will be the secret, or this will be a secret. There is maybe a job, depends on that. If you want to delete the job, which is not sure if you want in Kubernetes, I think it's anyway gets deleted automatically after a while. I'm not 100% sure. Then you want to again depend on that job. That is, and if we want to, as a special action, like just execute a deletion job, we can, by the way, do some kind of explicit hooks, but that's for where it comes the custom action in place. So then will be that job here, but I want to execute delete job. And after that is done, it's basically what you do in the next step. Okay, so basically now it's a problem. What I see, this is what is not there is okay, but I don't want to do this again, like deleting the job, or the delete job should be idempotent. If the job is not there, then it's fine. But again, this is the custom action is really you think about as it is a shell script that you can make this idempotent. So correct. Yeah, but basically
the missing part is the state. Is to keep track of the in progress.
So, but I think by default, by definition, you shouldn't do that. But if you want to have a state, then I address this in here, the last point. Actually, it also creates a little bit complexity, that if you want to manage the state in status, I mean, we could assure that you get the main resource, you always get the main custom resource and with the status in the input in these dependent resources. And but if you manage, when you put it in a secret or custom resources, as it could be done, then you can do that within the implementation of the dependence resource. The problem is that it a little bit makes, I think we should have explicitly marked this in the dependence resource, that this is manages an explicit state or other state than the status, because we cannot do then parallel execution. For example, if we have a DAG, which has kind of two legs, which are not independent of each other, this could be parallelly executed and the resource is parallelly created, but not if they kind of manage a common secret, because then that would be a conflict on that secret management, lost update problem and things like that.
I'm happy on going sequentially, but I think that this missing the argument for keeping the status saying that is something that we should not do is a little bit, or is, well, if you really needed to build something that is real world and that is not a simple Memcache, you really need higher level features for doing workflows and doing other stuff. So the reconcile loop is a pretty low level abstraction. And without state is hard to manage.
But in your use case, right? I mean, you want to create a job, but do you really need to track the state? I mean, basically, your deployment cannot be created before you obtain some information from something. And that something requires a secret. So when you reconcile, you could check, is the secret present, right? So you don't need to record somewhere that you're at step 1 because you can check, is the secret present on the cluster? And you get that directly from the cache.
I actually do need, in the sense that if I create the deployment in the step 0, what is going to happen is that the deployment will pick up maybe all the secrets that are not updated with the new flow spinned by the job. So
okay.
I understand the argument of trying to stick with the reconcile loop mentality. What I'm arguing is that there is a pretty low level abstraction for modeling the needs of nowadays operators.
But that's the Kubernetes philosophy, that you should reconcile the whole world each time, because basically otherwise, it's edge-based. I mean, edge-based. I can never remember which one is which. But basically, you shouldn't assume that you've seen all the events because you might have missed them. So you can't really rely on some local state because you might not have the proper world vision.
That's correct.
Rather.
That's correct, but it's like using a database. If you keep your state in a store that is Kubernetes or external, you can do other operations and you can build on top.
Yeah, but so again, I think we're covering this there.
But I wait to try out to see how it looks.
I mean, with these dependencies, and actually you're right. So for example, in this job case, so if we have a dependent, a resource, a job, which just needs to be executed once, that is an interesting case because that might be actually deleted and you don't want to create it again. Or if you create it again, that should be idempotent execution inside the job. But we could have, for example, a precondition to have that resource or something. That's usually a pre and post condition is already kind of a notion that we could introduce for those cases. But again, I don't think, actually, why are you creating a job? Why don't you call the API directly from the?
I was confronting with the author of the Kameke operator as well, and they do have the same problem because they are compiling stuffs. I have this problem because I'm running a re-augmentation of the Quarkus application that is basically compiling. So sometimes you have workflows that imply running something once and moving on from there. So it's just a peculiarity of some use cases, but I do believe that most use cases do exist.
Yes, but so you mark it in your status that this was running or already run this before, or how do you don't run it again? How do you check?
How I did it as a proof of concept was storing the status in the status field of the CR. That is one way of doing it.
Yeah, I mean, then we could just have a precondition like don't execute this action. If this precondition doesn't hold, you're checking that precondition implementation that this is that this is in the status, and then it's just kept like marked as it was executed. I mean, okay, so we will build up the system. These are the first steps and the first action. Probably these kind of precondition, postconditions, and the classic workflow notions will come. And I agree that this is something that, yeah, if it's your use case and it's a use case in CamLK, then should be there. But usually, I know if you at the activity models and these workflow models from UML and these things are with the precondition, postconditions are naturally happening in the systems UI. I think, yeah, you are right. We just have to put there at some point, probably. Yeah, I create it, and this maybe we can describe your use case here and discuss it further.
Yeah, we can speak.
In my opinion, at least. I don't know, Chris.
I mean, yeah, definitely. I mean, like I said, the current work on dependent resources is just a start. But before we can go further, we need to merge it. I mean, and start building on top of it. Right now, it's in that limbo state for like 2 months, where it's a pull request that's open and it's just basically in waiting loop. So it needs to be reconciled, basically.
Yeah, let's do it as soon as possible.
And I'm not pretending that work is finished or perfect or anything, but it just needs to, like you said, Andrea, if it's not merged, people are not going to use it and try it out. So we need to get it into the hands of people so that they can try it out and trash it if it needs to be trashed. Yeah, people need to be able to try it out and give their feedback. And definitely there are things that need to be improved and built on top of. That's for sure.
Yeah. My intention was actually to say this in the sense that this feature of dependent resources look to change quite a lot how we will build our operators. So I am eager to take a look at it and to start to use it because I want to see how much this fits my needs or not, and how can we build on top of it. But we really need a snapshot or something.
Yeah, and actually the plan is to make it in iterations. So we kind of will make somewhere explicit talks that this is kind of a work in progress. The APIs may change, and we won't increase the major version because of it. And yeah, so the dependence resources feature is kind of a subject of that might change and yeah, evolve. And maybe at some point with 2.5 we said that okay, now the API is stable. If this API we want to change again regarding to this feature, then it will be zero version, be free, and we will follow the semantic versioning from that point. But just in that regard, in this regard. But somehow you had to start and and do it step by step with iterations. Otherwise, it will be. As Christoph said, then there is a vicious cycle of this feedback loop that until it's not merged, we cannot review, cannot have feedback, and until we cannot go.
And that's also why it's important that feature is opt-in, so that the rest of if you want to write your operator the old way, or you don't want to, you don't care about having dependent resources managed for you, then you should still be able to do it just exactly the same as you do right now. And I need to make sure of that actually. But I think that's the case, but I'll check.
Awesome discussion, everyone. So we've got 1 minute left. Thank you all for your time. And if there's anything that did not get brought up, please feel free to bring that up for next week, and we can have that as the first discussion before we start. Appreciate your time, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.